Hello again. Now, the State Capture Report has recommended the setting up of an independent anti-corruption agency, the establishment of a national charter against corruption, and the creation of a procurement officer's profession. Now, part one of the findings contains some damning revelations about state-owned enterprises, government departments and officials. Now, let's discuss all of this now with legal journalist Karyn Maughan. Karyn, good afternoon. Compliments of the season. Thank you very much for your time. Before we delve into some aspects I would like to discuss with you, can I just start here? You are mentioned in this part one of the State Capture Report because of work you did as a journalist regarding SA Express. When you read what they mentioned there, what comes to mind to you? What do you think about it?
You know what is amazing about this report, and I mean, I am played a very, very small part in comparison to whistleblowers, you know, the people within state-owned entities and government who actually stood up and did the right thing. But it's incredible how throughout the report, you know, people are acknowledged, journalists are acknowledged, you know, the effort made to sort of uncover what had happened is recognized. And so, you know, to see at the beginning of the chapter on SA Express, you know, the Zondo Commission acknowledging that a financial mail story that I did in 2018 had actually led them to do the substantive and profound investigation into the apparent corruption that occurred there was amazing to me. And I think, you know, I actually discussed it with Karyn Maughan at the time, and I was so frustrated, you know, of course, the late Karyn Maughan. I was so frustrated because there was no comeback from government on any of the revelations. And she said to me, don't worry, you know, the most important thing is that change begins when people become aware of things and when these things are exposed. And so, you know, I thought of her a lot when I saw that finally there was a proper investigation, proper findings, and proper recommendations about actions that should be taken.
Yeah, and well done for that, and don't stop. I mean, another message that is coming through from what you've just said is that a lot of work done by excellent journalists like yourselves in exposing some of the rot has assisted the work of the State Capture Commission. Now, let's come to the issue of the way forward, but I want to have it in two bites. Firstly, everybody's asking, does the NPA have a capacity to prosecute and deal with a myriad of cases, from the simplest to the more complex? An hour ago or so, I spoke to the former head of the Asset Forfeiture Unit, Willie Hofmeyer, Advocate Hofmeyer at the NPA. He believes that they still have the capacity, but of course they have been damaged, and therefore it's going to take quite a long time. We should not expect a miraculous pace to come out of this process. What's your sense, Karyn?
I think the reality is that, you know, when Shamila Batoy came into office in February 2019, she spoke about the cancer of impunity and the fact that South Africa was in a crisis, that rule of law was in a crisis. And, you know, we're now 3 years down the line, more than 3 years, and those words should give us all pause for reflection, because, you know, there has been a continued culture of impunity. And not just in the big state capture cases. I mean, when one thinks of the fact that Dan Moyane named a witness on national television after being repeatedly told that doing so was unlawful and has yet to face any prosecution by the NPA, it is apparent that, you know, there are maybe substantive systemic issues why big corruption cases aren't being prosecuted, but there's also a complete lack of adequate explanation for why low-hanging fruit like the Moyane matter, like the insider trading clear finding that was made against Marcus Jooste in the Steinhoff matter, have not been prosecuted. And I think it's also time that, you know, we acknowledge that, you know, parastatals like Eskom, Transnet, PRASA, they belong to all of us. As South Africans, Eskom is meant to provide power supply to all of us. So in circumstances where the NPA is unable, because of skills issues or competence issues, to take those cases on, it needs to acknowledge that, and it needs to formally close those cases so that entities like Eskom, like PRASA, like Transnet, who have all uncovered a mountain of evidence, are able to privately prosecute them and thus ensure some form of accountability. Because I don't think South Africa can wait in terms of, seeking the accountability for what has happened and which continues to have such devastating impacts on us as a country.
So private prosecution could be the way. And another factor that I've heard being mentioned is that there's still some bad apples, so-called bad apples at the NPA, who might not be so keen as to proceed with some of these high-profile cases. But shouldn't Shamila Batohi adopt a strategy, Karyn? I don't know what are your thoughts, where you look at what are the low-hanging fruits coming out of the state capture report, which are the cases which are easier or simpler or less complex to begin with, and start building some track record from there after the publishing of this first report, of this part one of the report.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. And, the fact of the matter is that you don't have, we've seen the Brian Hlongwa matter, which has taken over a decade to get into court. Over 600, 700 charges in that matter. Now, once you get someone convicted on one count of corruption, that's 15 years. So, or fraud or whatever it is. Go and take the easy cases, the easy aspects, 1, 2, 3 charges at most, prosecute those and get the convictions. Because once the person's behind bars, that's really all that South Africans care about. These massive racketeering, hundreds and hundreds of charges, et cetera, are actually fundamentally, unhelpful to the NPA's prospects of ensuring convictions quickly, which is what the South African public is really asking for. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. There are cases that can be simply prosecuted. There's clear evidence that, in certain respects, and what Zondo has suggested, of course, is that, for instance, someone like Brian Molefe be prosecuted under the Public Finance Management Act, which the NPA, a piece of legislation which is meant to govern how public money is spent and the proper processes for it, but which the NPA, for whatever reason, as has been pointed out in the Zondo Commission report, has not utilized effectively. So, you can prosecute people for misspending money and not properly following process. It doesn't need to be a huge, elaborate corruption matter in order to be brought to court. The systemic failure to adhere to proper process and to break the law in terms of procurement is something that can be prosecuted and should be prosecuted.
Yeah, because people, as you said, South Africans are looking for that action and the consequence. Now, Karyn, while I have you, as we conclude, the recommendations, I just want your thought. The recommendations around setting up an independent anti-corruption agency, a national charter against corruption, which should be legally binding, I understand, in anyone who who procures goods and services with government, and the creation of a procurement officer's profession. When you see this recommendation, I just thought yet more institutions, when currently we should have existing tools and instruments to do. Or do you think there must be something that the Deputy Chief Justice or the Acting Chief Justice, as chairman of the State Capture Commission, and his team of lawyers have seen that is lacking, that maybe I'm not getting?
I think I can understand the frustration, but I think the most pivotal aspect of all of this is the independent anti-corruption agency. Because the NPA is still very much, as we have seen over the years, you and I have both seen it, very much open to political abuse. I mean, a few years ago, we were reporting on a spurious fraud case against the then Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, which collapsed spectacularly. Cases against Anwar Dramat, Glynis Breitenbach, Robert McBride, all of them collapsed, but very clearly politically, I would argue politically motivated. So in such circumstances, if you want to take government on, and the ANC is the ruling party, over the abuse of the procurement process to both enrich the ANC, of which there is ample evidence, and to effectively enrich political allies of the ANC, you cannot have government in charge of that body. And I think, if there is an oversight agency that monitors procurement and delivers real-world consequences to companies that don't adhere with proper practice so that they are cut off from the supply of funds that would be available to them if they were able to tender for these contracts, we could see profound behavioral shifts. But it's really about the political will and whether or not, the ANC supports it, given that this has been such a lucrative source for it, as corrupt source for it for so long. And I think that if there has been a push from people like CASAC for like 10 years now for such a body to exist, it may be perceived as a vote of no confidence in the NPA. I think it could be, it could be arguably seen as such. But in circumstances where tender fraud and corruption is so prevalent and so, within the structures of government, we need something that takes government's power away from it in terms of being able to keep perpetuating these abuses. Because ultimately, tenders are meant to serve all of us. It's about service delivery. And when they are abused and people who are not fit to perform those functions get these lucrative tenders, we all suffer.
I guess you're right, that independence thing. As you were talking there, thank you very much, Karyn Maughan. I was just imagining something else, but it's unrelated, but it's just a picture in my mind. When you have ruins, like we've got, the Mapungubwe ruins in northern Limpopo, it's such an old structure. You don't, and it's been affected by all kinds of challenges over the years. You don't renew it. You leave it there, you preserve it as is, and if you want to build something, you start afresh, something alongside to complement whatever efforts, and you make sure there are no bad apples in that independent structure. Karyn Maughan, thank you very much for your time and for your insights this hour here on eNCA DSTV channel 403.